SAST takes off and lands its rocket demonstrator, ISRO tested its reusable launch vehicle, Starbase is buzzing with preparation for Flight 5, ULA received its second Vulcan Centaur, sample from the far side of the moon returns to Earth, Elon Musk gives rare views of the StarFactory, NASA prepares for the ISS retirement, FireFly goes European, plenty of rocket launches this week, Russia and China formalizes their lunar base camp. I'm Christophe Paget for All About Space, and this is your weekly space update. Shanghai Academy of Spaceflight Technology, or SAST, is a branch of the Chinese CASC established in 1961. They are designing and manufacturing the Long Marches 2D, 4B, 4C, 6, 6A, 6C, and 12. Now, China is trying to catch up with SpaceX in terms of reusability, and SAST tested on June 23rd is vertical takeoff, vertical landing demonstrator with high success up to 12 km or 7.5 miles altitude. Now, in comparison, this flight and technology is about 10 years behind SpaceX, but with the resources, the benefit of hindsight thanks to SpaceX, and the less environmentally constrained Chinese airworthiness authorities, SAST is likely to catch up quickly with SpaceX. So good luck, SAST, and I will continue showing you the progress as they come. According to China and Asia Spaceflight, SAST's next test will be a planned 70 km vertical takeoff, vertical landing test with its 3.8 meter diameter prototype to cover the whole flight profile of the first stage, followed by a maiden orbital launch planned for 2025. ISRO has a huge space ambition, as you may already know. They intend to have a reusable launch vehicle similar to the Dream Chaser of Axiom Space. This week, they tested the landing performance for his third time of his reusable launch vehicle demonstrator called Pushback. It consisted of bringing the vehicle to 4.5 km altitude by helicopter, dropping it, and studying the high-speed vehicle handling and his aerodynamics in order to simulate as close as possible high-speed re-entry of the vehicle and demonstrate autonomous landing. ISRO chose an unfavorable windy condition and achieved a 500-meter cross range of pushback. At Starbase, at the launch site, we have seen all outer tanks from the vertical tank farm removed and disposed of. Next week will probably be the inner tanks. A large horizontal tank has joined the tank farm to be placed at the end of the very long row of tanks. It is not the last one though, and of course the base of the Mekazila Tower No. 2 was being assembled with metal pieces and further strengthened with concrete. A giant crane is being assembled in order to assemble the tall Mekazila Tower No. 2. SpaceX really spent a lot of effort to rethink all they do to do it better and faster. The base finally ended up as a box with an opening access on one side. In order to check the procedure of catching a super heavy booster, the prototype B14.1 was brought to the launch site, installed onto the launch pad, and some checks were made with the Mekazila chopsticks. At the production site, Starship No. 30, the one for the forthcoming IFT-5, after removing the old thermal protection tiles, is having its sacrificial ablative layer installed along with the new thermal tiles. More on the Starship program later on in this video from Elon Musk. ULA Vulcan Centaur Certification 2 hardware has arrived in Florida by boat. In the coming month, ULA will be stacking and testing the rocket in preparation for its second flight. Now, why is this second flight so important? Well, it is because the US Space Force originally contracted ULA for a 60% share of their payloads. but due to the Vulcan delay, ULA share dropped to 46%, and that US Space Force would only allow payloads to be carried out by a rocket which flew successfully at least twice. Now, it is therefore paramount for ULA to get its second flight without further delays. However, the second flight of the Vulcan was expected to carry the Axiom Dream Chaser, but since it has to dock with the ISS, Axiom has to complete a large series of tests, and they admitted that there is a risk of not meeting ULA timeline for the second launch. Therefore, ULA might have to send a dummy payload instead, or small satellites as Ariane 6 is doing. May 3rd, CASC launched Change E6 satellite, which landed on the hidden side of the moon on June the 1st. I have talked about it in a previous episode. See on the top right of your screen for a particular link to see that video again. The team had a short time to carry out various experiments, including sample extraction, before the lunar night, because the lander was not designed with heaters and would therefore not survive the 2 weeks in the cold. Shortly after, the samples were boxed and sent back to Earth. June 25th, the samples have returned and landed in the Inner Mongolia region and will be analyzed at a later stage. The scientific community is awaiting the results to see if this area is water-rich, which would help validate the location of the future lunar base, which I will mention later on in this video. Tim Dodd, also known as the Everyday Astronaut YouTube creator, has interviewed Elon Musk at Starbase, and we have learned, thanks to both, a few things worth sharing today. Let us start with the enormous StarFactory. Elon started with the fact that the outside of the factory is more or less complete, and that in the long term it will be able to make up to 100 Starship a year, or one every 3.5 days, to build a colony on Mars. In comparison, today, Falcon 9 second stage rate is one every 2 days in a much smaller plant. So Starship version 2 will be able to lift over 100 tons to low Earth orbit after a few improvements. As for Starship version 3, with engine improvements and further optimization, will be capable of sending over 200 tons to low Earth orbit, including full and rapid reusability, as fast as 2 hours later, using the Mechazilla arms, according to Elon. No one has ever made a fully reusable rocket before, hence SpaceX is constantly having to iterate its design to make such a challenge a reality. They will need less boosters than Starships, about 5 ships for every boosters, especially when the booster will take up to 10 minutes to return to site, whilst the ship may take up to half a day depending on its orbit and inclination. The focus this year is on the Starship re-entry or is heat shield and not sending the Starlink V2 satellites to orbit. Regarding the thermal protection tiles prior to IFT4, Elon was already planning to replace Starship tiles by more resistant ones with ablative layers, but could not say much due to ITAR control reasons. However, it is a very difficult problem to crack. In contrast, the best heat shield so far was on the Space Shuttle, but took an average of 155 days and around 3,000 people to refurbish a shuttle heat shield. Elon mentioned that on IFT3, after stage separation, the booster had low tank pressure, which has been resolved for IFT4. The impressive part of this video was the mega bay, with 3 boosters lined up at the back, totaling a staggering 99 Raptor engines, a quantity that no other rocket suppliers are capable of matching. One side of the StarFactory is already filled with hardware and tooling, while the other side is still being kitted for. What a drastic change from the days of tents. SpaceX has invested into such a plant well before they were convinced the Starship will succeed, So Elon has a huge degree of confidence for such a concept to work. The StarFactory looks really clean, which changes from the dusty tents of the past. The rest of the interview with Elon was at the launch pad. We could see the huge size of the pad and rocket with Elon and team for scale on the foreground. An absolutely colossal engineering. Anecdotally, Elon thought of the Mechagodzilla arms catching off the first stage after watching the Godzilla movie. Mechagodzilla Tower number 2 will also be taller than the first one to account for the Starship version 3 height increase of 30 meter or 100 feet. The pad, flame trench and water coolant is completely redesigned on Tower number 2 compared to Tower 1, according to Elon Musk. Regarding attempting booster catch at IFT 5, it will happen with Mechagodzilla Tower number 1. And if the tower arms get damaged, Elon said that they have replacement arms, which are even an improved version. NASA has awarded SpaceX the contract to deorbit the International Space Station in a controlled and safe manner at retirement date in 2030. The single award contract has a total potential value of $843 million. FireFly Alpha rocket is going international. Together with the Swedish Space Corporation, or SSC, FireFly is expanding Alpha's launch capabilities to Esringer Space Center in Sweden starting in 2026. Now, this new partnership will unlock further capabilities for the European satellite market. As a reminder, so far only PLD is hoping to find a launch site in Spain. Other nearby vertical launch sites are outside the EU, so one in Norway and two in the UK. The week in rocket launches started on June 22nd from China with a CASC launch of his Long March 2C for his Swarm mission in collaboration with European space agencies. The satellite reached its intended orbit. However, the first stage crashed near residence, exhausting some of its toxic hypergolic propellant. The next day, SpaceX launched a Starlink batch called Group 10-2 from Florida on board a Falcon 9. It was the 11th flight of the first stage, which landed on a drone ship. June 24th, SpaceX launched a Falcon 9 from California with another Starlink batch, Group 9-2. The first stage landed on the drone ship for its 11th time, too. June 25th, SpaceX launched a Falcon Heavy from Florida for its mission GOES-U, a weather satellite for the NOAA. The centaur was expanded for performance reasons, whilst the side boosters were brand new and returned to launch site. The last rocket launch was on the 27th of June for SpaceX with another Falcon 9 Starlink mission, Group 10-3 from Florida. The first stage flew for the 22nd time, another new record for SpaceX, and landed on the drone ship. In summary, from January 1st to June 27th, 2024, 124 rockets were successfully launched, for which 80 were from American companies or institutions and 28 from Chinese companies or institutions. The Russian and Chinese governments have now signed an agreement to collaborate in building a lunar base called International Lunar Research Station, or ILRS, to become a science output from the lunar surface to carry out biological and medical experiments, as well as study in situ resource utilization. It is also planned to have telescopes since the Moon has a thin atmosphere called exosphere and therefore offers a lower distortion than seen on Earth. The ILRS basic components are expected to be completed by 2035, and this project also attracted other countries such as Azerbaijan, Egypt, Pakistan, and Belarus. I will bring more on this topic when it comes. Let us end this episode with a picture taken by the James Webb Space Telescope of the Serpens Nebula. It is located 1,300 light years away from Earth, that is 12.3 quadrillion kilometers or 7.6 quadrillion miles. This nebula is home to a particularly dense cluster of newly formed stars, around 100,000 years old, some of which will eventually grow to the mass of our Sun. The center of the image is what is known as the flapping bat shadow. It contains one particular bright star that has an hourglass shadow above and below it. The nebula is a young star forming region filled with wispy orange, red, and blue layers of gas and dust. Now, what an amazing picture! Thank you very much for watching your latest episode of All About Space. I'm Christophe Paget. Goodbye and have a great week.